Okay, so I just thought I'd make a quick little video today with regard to what to eat before you work out. Um, well, this is largely going to depend on what type of training you're doing, because if you're doing cardio, it's going to be different to whether or not you're training with weights or if you're doing something a bit more sport specific. Um, but I'm going to make the assumption that most people watching this video and looking at my stuff are primarily concerned with looking better or getting weller. So I'm going to leave the athletic and sports nutrition type approach out of it and talk more about what you might want to do relative to training or exercise for looking better. So higher intensity type work like weight training or circuit training or a fast run or anything that sort of requires a level of moderate to high intensity effort, that'll likely have you working in the anaerobic training zone, and what that means is without oxygen and aerobic. And so this type of exercise will predominantly use carbohydrates and proteins as a source of energy for fuel. Instead of fat. So you're not really going to be burning fat during that type of training anyway. So it makes more sense that you actually give the body something to go off and work from. So you're going to want to have a small amount of carbohydrate and protein in your pre-workout snack. But what we don't want to do is have anything too heavy, because if you eat something too heavy, that can impact your digestion and sort of create a feeling of awkwardness and discomfort, because your body's trying to digest something whilst you're trying to work out. So examples of what you could have would be an easily digestible animal protein source like chicken breast or white fish. Typically people eat these for main meals, and it's not something most people want to have and multiple times a day and for a snack, unless you're really heavily into your body composition nutrition, like a bodybuilder might be. So typically what people tend to like a bit more is perhaps having a scoop of your favorite protein powder and some fruit alongside it. Even a small piece of fruit and a handful of nuts like some almonds can work for people who don't like protein powder. So you don't really need masses of food or anything. You just need to give a little bit of food, which will stabilize your blood sugar and stabilize your blood sugar, or lead to a gentle increase in blood sugar to give you some energy while you're training, but not a huge spike like you might get if you ate a load of sugar. Now, on the other hand, if we're talking about low intensity work, like some people like to train, for instance, a gentle jog, a light swim, or some yoga or something like that. Now, we're in a bit of a different ball game here. You don't really need to supply energy to the body, or so to speak, with this type of training, because you're working at a far lower level of intensity, predominantly in the aerobic zone with oxygen. And it's at this level of intensity where your body is far more efficient at burning fat for fuel, which is a good thing for body composition and fat loss. But if you eat a load of food first, you'll simply just end up burning the food for energy instead of the body fat. So the better thing to do would be to do this type of exercise fasted, or at least if not fasted, then semi-fasted. What you could do is have just a small amount of protein, or a shot of protein powder, or a scoop of amino acids beforehand, simply just to preserve muscle tissue, but not to get enough food to invoke too much of a rise in blood sugar or insulin. So this is the sort of thing that the type of exercise that people might want to do first thing in the morning on an empty stomach or on a semi-empty stomach, but you don't need to do that. You can also do this type of exercise later in the day, but what I would do is make sure that you're in a post-fed state, which means that you haven't just had a meal. Ideally we would want a couple of hours, at least more like 3 hours before you after you've eaten, before you work out. Because if you do low intensity, by low intensity I don't mean to demean the exercise, to sort of be down the exercise and say it's not worth doing. It's just, but a jog which you can maintain a pace for like half an hour, 60 minutes, that is low intensity work. When something like CrossFit or intense weightlifting is high intensity work. So when you do fasted low intensity work, that's when you're going to be getting more of a body composition and fat loss effect. I mean, it's fine to eat beforehand and eat some carbohydrates if your only goal is sport specific work. Like an athlete might not really be interested in losing fat and body composition, but I wouldn't recommend eating first if your main goal is to drop weight or drop body fat, because you won't be burning the fat, you'll just be burning the food you've eaten. Now, universally, I'm going to give just a couple of rules here. Whatever you do and whatever you eat, even if you're an athlete or just a recreational exerciser who just wants to look a bit better, the universal guidelines I would give are, firstly, not to eat a huge amount of refined carbohydrates before you train. You know what I mean by that? Things like white bread, table sugar, just refined grains on their own without offsetting them with enough protein. Because what can happen is this can lead to quite an aggressive surge in blood sugar, and that can have a negative effect and lead you to crash a few minutes later or an hour or two later, and that's the last thing you want during exercise. To 1 minute have a load of energy and the next minute to completely crash. I've seen this happen. That's actually happened to me before, and it's not pleasant. But a lot of people feel it day in, day out, those 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. energy slumps. Often that's because people aren't eating the appropriate breakfast and lunch and they're crashing. Also, getting back on track, if you eat a lot of refined carbs before your workout, you will experience a huge increase in insulin in the body, and insulin will prevent fat loss from occurring. It will inhibit the free fatty acids from being burnt. Another thing that a high amount of carbohydrates can do is increase serotonin and increase sleepiness, and just not really give you much drive. So that's one thing. Another thing is to avoid lots of dietary fat in your pre-workout meal, because firstly, the fat can suppress growth hormone production, and secondly, it can make you feel pretty heavy. It requires a lot of digestion, and this leads on to my last point, which is just avoid large meals altogether pre-workout. You don't want to eat a huge meal and then half an hour later go into a hard training session, because your body can only do one job at once in the way of digestion or training. The blood is either going to the gut for digestion or it's going to your muscles for exercise. And if you try and do both at once, you might be in trouble. Last week I had a client, a new one, who we hadn't really talked about nutrition yet, and it was only his second workout, and he showed up for his morning session, and only half an hour before had eaten a 5-egg omelette, and it didn't go well. So those high fat and heavy meals aren't great to put pre-workout. A little bit of fat's fine though. I actually am a big fan of using a small amount of dark chocolate before your workout, because the polyphenols in dark chocolate and the other properties can increase cognition and blood flow to the brain and lead to increased firing of neurons. So that can actually work in your advantage if you have a small amount. And the last thing I'll say is that you don't actually need to eat at all before working out. If your nutrition is pretty good and you feel good and you had a meal, you say you had lunch a few hours ago and you're still feeling fine, that probably indicates that you're controlling your blood sugar pretty well. So you don't, that pre-workout meal isn't compulsory, but some people like to eat more regularly. Some people enjoy the 5 feedings a day, and some people do better with a pre-training snack. They perform better and they feel better. So that's when you might want to put some food in your sort of pre-training regimen, and maybe you can start following some of the tips I've given you today. like the scoop of protein powder and fruit of choice. What I often like to do is mix some protein powder with a small amount of water to create a mousse or paste, and throw some berries into that. You've got some relatively low calorie and high in protein, high in not high, but sufficient in some healthy carbohydrates. But the main trick is, don't overcomplicate things. Do something that's easy for you and that you find enjoyable, but also something which is going to help improve the workout and invoke that fat loss effect, as opposed to inhibit it. So yeah, hopefully that's helped you. I find that knowing some of the tricks of the trade like this can help people with the results long term and help avoid doing what's gonna thwart your success or not contribute to it. So, all right, guys, take care. Thanks for watching.